Hi, Pradeep. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great. It's all set.
Wonderful. So, Pradeep, will someone from your team handle the presentation?
I do not know whether you told me otherwise. I have the presentation with me, so I can handle it myself. Or
that would be great. There are a couple of videos, so if you can do that, that would be great. Or
yeah, I would do that. I would do that.
This colleague of mine, I'm just trying to see if she's connected, Mahima.
Yeah, Mahima, I don't.
Let me just call her.
Mahima, I don't see, but anyway.
I'm just calling her.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Mahima, are you connected to this?
No, sir.
Can you connect and share the screen?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So you handle the presentation, please, if you can.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So I think she'll do it. That might be the easiest.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday. It was downloaded, and it was some 165 MB or something.
Yeah. So there are a couple of videos which are sort of useful there. So
sure, of course. Several of
thanks for organizing it. I don't know how is Chennai doing in terms of the virus, but Delhi is pretty bad. So there's some kind of semi-lockdown coming up over the weekend.
Yeah, we lost one of our faculty members.
Oh, very sorry to hear that.
So it's not directly, but COVID-induced complications.
Right. Yeah, it's a pity. I met Radha yesterday. You remember Radha?
Yeah, of course, of course.
And so Radha and I had coffee. She's now the additional secretary in the Ministry of Industrial Development.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've been in touch with her. So her husband had a bad attack of COVID.
She sent me a note. She wanted some new ideas in the context of water sensors and all. So I sent her a presentation. They were supposed to organize something for developing, but then there have been some changes in the ministry, I was told.
Oh yeah, there have been some now. The person in charge of the Jal Jeevan mission is himself got COVID. His wife has got COVID, Bharat Lal. So they're all a little bit sort of under the weather at the moment.
We are also streaming it live on YouTube, just in case the limit is reached soon.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we need to close this by what? I mean, you need to leave at...
yeah, but if you can close it by 6, that's fine.
Okay.
So I thought I'll present for about 20-25 minutes, and then
sure.
After your initial remarks, then very happy to take comments, questions.
Sure. That is what we will do, as usual in an IIT system. Questions, that's the end of... I mean, that's how we begin anything, and then...
Sure.
Yeah.
So Mahima, are you there? Mahima is doing something.
Yes, sir, I'm connected.
Okay, great. So Professor Pradeep, over to you whenever you're ready. I think we are set.
Yeah, we are. I'm just asking my people. 4:45, so we should start. Good afternoon. My name is Pradeep. I teach chemistry at IIT Madras. Welcome to this rather uncommon event organized by a research group. We normally conduct meetings on issues of science. In that respect, this is unusual. Books of science are normally introduced through reviews. and we normally don't conduct meetings. This meeting is, however, for introducing a book, well, connected with science in some sense. I met Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer, the author, over 2 years ago when we conducted a UNICEF-sponsored meeting on water on the World Water Day in 2019. Had been to the Paryavaran Bhavan, his ministry's office, a couple of times, but met only the Joint Secretary, Mrs. V. Radha, and a few officers there, and never had the opportunity to meet Mr. Iyer or walk with him or climb up the stairs of that building. He was a secretary there in that ministry. After our meeting in 2019, I talked to him a few times over telephone on various issues. One was about a lecture series we organized on water, which he inaugurated. Towards the end of 2020, I learned that he had left the secretaryship and joined back World Bank in the United States. Soon I got a notification that his phone number has changed. Some months later, I was surprised to learn about his book, Method in the Madness. I received the book soon after it was released and read about 40, 50 pages of it almost immediately. Then the semester got too intense. I could not manage time to read the balance. Then all of a sudden, one day an urge came to me and I read the balance in just one sitting. I'm sure that many of you would have read the book by this time. Obviously, it's an engaging story of an insider, outsider, insider, as he has been calling himself. The success of Swachh Bharat mission under his leadership showed that radical transformation that's possible across the country in certain forgotten sectors. I wrote an email to him appreciating his work, and immediately his response came that he's in India and a meeting to discuss the book is indeed possible. There we are. We will have a short 20-25 minute presentation by Param Iyer. Then the stage will be open for questions. Please do ask all that you wish to ask. While he is making this presentation, keep a question or two ready. We are going to start this now, but then I would like to tell you that this Zoom link can take only 100 people. So in case we cross that 100, and if your connection gets lost, you will have to join this event through the YouTube channel. I have sent the link already. Over to you, Param.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, for that introduction. And it's a real pleasure to connect with you and all the participants associated with IIT Madras again. Professor Pradeep didn't mention, but all of you know, he's one of the pioneers in technology, particularly in water, which is my sector. And I had the privilege of meeting him a couple of years ago, where he conducted this very, an amazing workshop, which we focused on reuse of wastewater, grey water. And he showed me around the innovation center there and the laboratories. And, I was completely blown away by the level of innovation, of disruption. So fascinating experience. I've kept in touch with Professor Pradeep. And in fact, we are hoping to do some work with him and his team in the World Bank in Washington, where I've gone back. So very glad to be back. Thank you very much for inviting me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few slides, which is going to do two things. It's the first part is going to be about the Swachh Bharat mission itself, and the story of that. What were some of the important lessons we learned, which are then also reflected in the book. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I wrote the book and how I did it. And Swachh Bharat figures centrally in the book, but about half of it, but the rest of it is sort of the insights and the lessons I learned over my 38, 39-year career in the government as an insider, and then in the World Bank as an outsider. But I had another outsider stint as the road manager and coach for my daughter, who was a professional tennis player, my son as well. And then I came back to the government. I became an insider again in 2016, where I was a secretary in the ministry, where I met Pradeep. So this will give you a little snapshot of that journey, and very much looking forward to an interactive session. Your comments, questions, suggestions, that would be great. My colleague Mahima, who's an IIM Bangalore graduate, she's helping me with this. So she'll take us through the slides. Can we go to the next, please? So this was the problem which which we had to confront when the Prime Minister Modi announced the Swachh Bharat mission. That famous speech from the Red Fort, 15th August 2014, his first Independence Day speech. I was actually in the World Bank in our Vietnam office in Hanoi, and my wife and I were watching the Prime Minister's first Independence Day speech. And 45 minutes into his speech, he started talking about toilets, the indignity of women and girls who have to defecate in the open. And then he made a commitment. He made a very bold announcement that India would become open defecation free to honor the Mahatma. And that would happen by the 2nd of October 2019, which was the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji. So I was blown away by that commitment, that announcement, putting sanitation on center stage. And I remember telling my wife, I'm stuck here in the bank in Vietnam, and I really wish I was back in the government in any capacity to be associated with this program. But this is the first time a prime minister is talking about sanitation from the Red Fort. And of course, nothing really happened. I was incredibly lucky 15 months later. You can read about that in the book, actually, the story of how I came back. But this was the problem which we confronted. Look at the scale. 1.3 billion people, 550 million people defecated in the open, about 60% of the world's open defecators. So obviously, Sustainable Development Goal 6.2 could not be achieved if India didn't, provide safe access to sanitation. And as you know, we have more than 600,000 villages. We have 700 districts, 36 states, and in our federal system, water and sanitation being state subjects, all the action and the implementation is done at the state, district, and at the local level. So that makes it even more challenging. And if you look at the acceleration or the increase in rural sanitation in India since independence, practically nil until 1980. And then it's very slowly started increasing. And by the time the Swachh Bharat mission was announced, the coverage was under 40%. So, to go from 38 to 100 in less than 5 years looked like mission impossible. Next, please. Now, here's that defining moment when 15th August 2014. And I think this was a defining moment in the sanitation journey of the country. So please listen to this. It's a very short excerpt.
भाइयों बहनों, आपको लगता होगा क्या लाल किले से सफाई की बात करना, लाल किले से टॉयलेट की बात बताना, ये कैसा प्रधानमंत्री है? भाइयों बहनों, मैं नहीं जानता हूं मेरी कैसी आलोचना होगी, इसे कैसे लिया जाए, लेकिन मैं मन से मानता हूं। मैं गरीब परिवार से आया हूं, मैंने गरीबी देखी, और गरीब को इज्जत मिले, इसकी शुरुआत यहीं से होती है। और इसलिए स्वच्छ भारत का एक अभियान इसी 2 अक्टूबर से मुझे आरंभ करना है।
So that was that big, bold announcement. And, everything sort of flowed from there. Next, please.
भाइयों बहनों,
So when we started this program, we faced 4 major challenges. We call them the 4 S's: the scale, 550 million people. How do you change behavior at scale? Speed, we had a 5-year window. And how do you build a sense of urgency and avoid that drip incremental approach which had taken place over the previous 60, 70 years? Then how do you actually deal with the stigmas and myths? People thinking having a toilet inside their house is unclean. So changing these habits and beliefs, a real wicked problem, behavior change at scale. And then of course, sustainability. Once you achieve a certain milestone, how do you make sure that people don't slip back and how do you make it stick? So these were the kind of 4 key challenges we faced. And we had to deal with each one of them in a different way. So I'll just take you through that very briefly. Next, please. So scale had to be dealt with scale. It sounds a bit of a cliche, but this was Team Swachh Bharat across the country. We 120 million school students, perhaps the best ambassadors for cleanliness, masons, women masons in Jharkhand, they were called Rani Mistris. Swachhagrahis, this was a very, very important foot soldier in the Swachh Bharat revolution. These were village motivators, on average 1 per village, who were trained in community approaches to sanitation to trigger that behavior change. So they were an army on the ground. The sarpanchas or the village head, we had, there are about 250,000 of them, 2.5 lakhs. District collectors who were leading this program. We operated on the PM, CM, DM, Prime Minister, Chief Minister, District Magistrate formula. Then we had young professionals, they were called Zira Preraks, given to us by the Tata Trust, who were there almost 1 per district. Idealistic, energetic, innovative, thinking outside the box. They were supporting the collectors and really focusing on the program. A lot of brand ambassadors, you can see a lot of Bollywood superstars, sports stars, all of them came out and helped us. And then of course we were lucky. We had 1 communicator in chief. And I think the Prime Minister never missed an opportunity to push the program, talk about its benefits. And that of course made all the difference. Next, please. Speed, right? Now, the PM's vision had to be translated through a mission into a ground reality. And so it became important to first get a team which believed in the mission. And we needed some quick wins to get credibility. So we started focusing on low-hanging fruits for a demonstration effect. And we started creating champion collectors, sarpanchas, swachhagrahi. So you can see in July 2016, a couple of months after I joined, there were only 16 open defecation free ODF districts out of the 700 odd. And we targeted initially 100 districts in year 1. We said, we're going to work with these low hanging fruits. You can see from the map of India that brown signifies kind of non-open defecation free districts. So we had to go from 16 to 700 in less than 4 years. And that was the challenge. But then as we started making progress, seeing was believing, and nothing succeeds like success. So that was one clear strategy from the beginning. Next, please. Now, stigma. These, some problems with previous sanitation programs. It's a very wicked problem. So no one said it was easy, but some of the assumptions had, were not really working. So one assumption was if the government gives you a free toilet, everyone would use it. But the reality was it was not a product which anyone really wanted, right? So demand had to be stimulated or created. And there was also an assumption of rationality. So the messaging previously would typically focus on the health and economic benefits of toilet, right? So you get a toilet, you will improve your health, your family will not fall sick, etc. But the reality we found, and this is where international experts on hygiene and behavior change, like Val Curtis of the London School, Cass Sunstein, the co-author of Nudge. So we have understood the reality was, and also learning from the ground, non-rational motives like love, dignity, disgust actually are more powerful when you're trying to market a product for which there's no intrinsic demand. Next, please. So these are some of the levers. Now take Pride, for example, right? On the left, you can see that's a toilet from a tribal art. I think it's from Jharkhand or Orissa, where people are proud about their culture. So that's reflected on the wall of the toilet, right? And on the right, you can see this is from a Hindi movie that Salman Khan, where again there's pride in having a toilet. That's from one of his movies. So pride was used a lot. You own a toilet, keep it clean, and I'm proud to have a toilet at home. Many people started calling it Izzat Ghar, which in Hindi means a sort of a respectful place, a place of pride. Next, please. Disgust. My friend Val Curtis, the late Val Curtis, unfortunately, she passed away last year, uh, called herself a disgustologist. And, we use disgust as a trigger. So here you can see one of our Swachhagrahis, a village motivator, is actually going through in a kind of PRA, a participatory rural appraisal village mapping exercise in a community. And what they actually do is, you can see on the left, they take up human hair, dip it in a pile of excreta, and then put it into a glass of water. And then they pass that glass around and ask people to drink it. And everyone recoils because it's disgusting, right? To drink water from a human hair dipped in excreta is in it. You can see that in the glass. And so then people start understanding that flies, they've got 6 legs, they dip their feet in excreta, they come and sit on your food. So you may think that you have a toilet and I'm fine, but the fly, which is sitting on excreta outside because your neighbor doesn't have a toilet, comes and sit on your food as well. So disgust was quite a powerful lever to get people to understand the importance of having a toilet, essentially to contain excreta safely so that it's not spread around. Next, please. And of course, love, right? You can see a cartoon from Sudhir Dar, again, the late Sudhir Dar, who used to do an annual cartoon calendar for the Swachh Bharat mission. This was a very common theme where you can see the man is proposing to the lady, he's got everything, but she's saying, do you have a toilet? And in fact, in many places across the country, houses people would make sure that their daughters were marrying into houses only if they had toilets. So that became another important sort of trigger for changing behavior. Love. Next, please. Here, I'm showing you a little clip from this movie, a very powerful movie by Akshay Kumar, became a good friend, called Toilet, Ek Prem Katha, Love Story. And here, it's a story of, it's a Bollywood story, boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married. She finds out he doesn't have a toilet and she leaves him, so, right? But this is an early part of the movie. It's a very powerful scene. It's in Hindi, but I think everyone will get the message.
ये महारानी मैं क्या कर बैठी है एक सोच की बात लेकर
निकल ली सवारी मर्द तो घर के पीछे बैठ जाते हैं पर हम तो औरतें हैं हमें तो हर चीज के लिए ज्यादा मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी है ना क्योंकि समझौता भी हम ही को करना है यही तो सिखाया हमारी संस्कृति ने पेट पकड़ के बैठो अंधेरा होने का इंतजार करो मर्द जो खुले में करते तुम अंधेरों में करो पर चुप रहो मैंने तो अपनी मुसीबत का हल निकाला है पर तुम्हें तो ये भी ना पता कि तुम मुसीबत में हो इन्हीं लोटों में चली जाओगी एक दिन और जीते जी इन्हीं में कैद हो
Right. So, I mean, the lady is refusing to go out and join the other women who go out together at the crack of dawn to defecate in the open. And, it's quite a powerful scene. It was used extensively, particularly in UP and Bihar, which were some of our most lagging states. So dignity, again, became another lever for changing behavior. Next, please.
ये महारानी
Can we go to the next? Yeah. And this is just a snapshot of some of the communication tools which we use. Again, each one was different. So on the left side, you can see how that's when I entered a toilet pit in Warangal to destigmatize the emptying of one of the twin pits. It's also to make a plug for that amazing technology, which is, many people think is very old school, but actually the twin pit is a low-cost model which is environmentally friendly as well, but also to destigmatize a myth. Shaucha Singh is a salesman, and on radio, we use this extensively to debunk many myths. Social media, we started out with very low number of followers. We went to more than 500,000, but plenty of work to be done. So the ministry got a Facebook page, was on Instagram, etc. And then, of course, Bollywood movies, Toilet Ek Prem Katha, you saw a glimpse from that. So we went from interpersonal communication on the ground through Swachagrahis all the way to mass media through these different means, which became very, very important. Next, please. The fourth is the sustainability. So how do you go from ODF to ODF plus? And this became a very important outcome for us, objective, 2 years before the end of the mission, and or before that milestone was achieved. So sustaining ODF is critical. Cass Sunstein told me that it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years of continued work to make sure that the change behavior will stick. And then we also moved into a broader definition of sanitation, solid and liquid waste management, which is where we took advice from Professor Pradeep and his team. You can see grey water management, but also plastic waste management. And so it went from ODF, open defecation free, to ODF plus. And that's the current program, which is the second phase of the Swachh Bharat mission, which is focusing on sustaining and broadening. Next, please. So these were the outcomes of the program. And you can see on the left, there are some big numbers. Those are the two maps of India. I think that gives you the best snapshot of a before and after story. October 2nd, 2014, when the program was actually launched, the coverage was 39%. And then, of course, on October 2nd, 2019, the states declared themselves open defecation free. Every district certified it was ODF. There would have been some gaps. Many people ask me, was it really 100%? Every district, there's a self-declaration process, there's a verification process. We would do an annual survey of 100,000 households, and usage was always above 90, which was the main test of behavior change. And the numbers and all the 110 million toilets which were built were geotagged. So they existed and they could be seen. And of course, there would be gaps. There would be some people left out, and that program needs to continue. Next, please. So we also made sure that we had external evaluations to validate the outcomes of the program. And so you can see the World Bank would do an annual sanitation survey with an expert committee overseeing it. UNICEF did a couple of studies which showed that every household in an ODF village would save something like 50,000 rupees, $720 a year on account of avoided medical fees, etc. 7.6 million jobs were created. WHO found that more than 300,000 lives, typically of kids below the age of 5, normally, these diarrheal deaths would have been averted. Health outcomes, environmental outcomes, because there's less groundwater contamination when excreta doesn't go into the local pond. So all these sort of externalities, as the economists say, the positive externalities due to the program became important to have validated by external agencies. Next, please. So these were the 4 pillars of this behavioral transformation. And we had a book out on this as well, which I edited a couple of years ago. The 4 Ps: political leadership, clearly from the top; public financing. So the government believed in it and invested in it. And they're starting to do that in the health sector today, particularly in the context of COVID. More than $20 billion or 1.3 lakh crores were invested in this. And that's a question I get from many countries. And you can see that third picture. It's about partnerships where we had health ministers from many countries. The Prime Minister, of course, was there, the Secretary General of the UN. So they say, listen, our Prime Minister, President in other countries like in Africa are convinced, but our finance minister is not investing in sanitation, which actually gives you a 4:1 return in terms of health and economic outcomes. So this was another lesson. And of course, people's participation. How do you make this a revolution? How do you make it a Jan Andolan, which is a people's movement, and get people to own it and get the village to be accountable for making itself open defecation free? So these were the 4 major lessons we learned, which we shared internationally. Next, please. I'm now coming to the book, and I've got only a few slides left. So this book essentially, I've had a rather unusual career in the civil service. I mentioned been in and out and in again. And so my wife, who's been my advisor, said, why don't you at some point write about this unusual journey? And of course, there was never time, right? Like Pradeep didn't have time to read the book after he read 60 pages. He got caught up in academic work. So I had a diary when I was the road manager for my daughter's 2-year tennis traveling stint, but never got down to writing a book. But then on 24th March last year, just over a year ago, when the lockdown was imposed, my traveling suddenly stopped. I used to go out at least once a week, usually twice, to the field, to states, to districts, to villages, to see the action on the ground. And traveling was suddenly stopped. So I saved a bit of time on that, and then I followed my father's lead. In the old days, he learned French through a gramophone record in Srinagar. And he would sort of do that from 4:30 to 7:30 in the morning before the day started. So I tried to do the same, and I managed with a little bit of discipline to start, 4:30 to 7:30 in the morning. I would get up and start writing, and managed to get a rough draft in about 3 to 4 months. So that was the occasion to sort of put it all down, and then of course it went through some editing and refining later. But that was the opportunity to actually get down and hammer it out. So, but pro tips, as I mentioned, this book is, I'm trying to share the lessons I learned and some of them in a very practical way through what I call pro tips. They're very simple. I'll give you a couple of examples later, but it's something which I learned and I'm trying to share with others, which was one of the reasons for writing the book. So not just to tell a story, but to share experiences which can relate to today's typically youngsters who are starting out, but for anyone else as well. And all of us have our stories. So it's good to keep a diary and to put it down so that if you want to write a book later, you'll have your basic data with you. Next, please. And so this is, it's in 3 parts. The first 18 years are my career as an insider after, just before I joined the IAS, how I got in. It's all a little tongue in cheek, but you can see the chapters themselves are lessons, right? If you never try, you'll never know. Now, I wanted to be a tennis professional. I wasn't good enough. I tried for private sector jobs. I didn't get in. And I was lucky to get into the IAS, and that's another story. But all of us will, it's good to play the hand you're dealt, right? So all of us sometimes complain, I've got this bad assignment, or I'm stuck in this sector. I wish I had a better boss. But, you've got to play the hand you're dealt. And I was, in a sense, shuffled and reshuffled in the government of India. I wasn't very happy then, but, I learned a lot. And then my stint as a district magistrate or a collector in Bijnor in UP. And I actually, in water, I'm supposed to be a sort of technical person, and some people think I'm an international expert in water and sanitation. I actually stumbled into a specialization. And the book talks about what happened. And then, of course, because of that specialization, I got into the World Bank, where it's knowledge, not authority, which commands respect, right? In the IAS and the government, there's a big hierarchy. And which batch are you? And everyone says sir to you, right? And you sort of command respect or authority based on your seniority. It doesn't work in the World Bank. I mean, there it's your knowledge, it's your experience. And so I started, slowly learning that approach. And then, of course, I took a break. My daughter wanted to play professional tennis. I was a coach, and I took a 2-year break, and many people thought I was crazy. But I think that was one of the most enjoyable stints in my career. So family, for me, takes precedence, and I'm sure all of you agree with that. So difficult decisions, but it's good to seize the moment. Next, please. And this is one of the lessons which I learned, and it's called carpe diem, seize the day or seize the moment. There'll be opportunities in life, and you need to seize the moment. Here's a little illustration. When I was the subdivisional magistrate in Dehradun, in then undivided UP, and I made a big mistake in arresting the wrong person. And one of the local newspaper, the Rags, put out a big headline saying, SDM Dehradun plunges administration into mess. So I was really nervous, but I had a great boss who fully supported me. So you're lucky if you have a senior or a boss who will protect you even if you make a bona fide mistake. So that's a little sketch of that. Can we go to the next slide, please? And in the next stint, you can see I'm a road manager. That's my daughter Tara, who played professional tennis. She played Federation Cup for India. She was number 2 to Sania Mirza. They had a big rivalry going. You can see some shoes hanging there. That's actually in Chongqing in China, where it was so hot that she was sweating her shoes through. So they were hung out to dry. I'm taking statistics, what was your serve percentage? How many backhand down the lines did you hit? Did you come to the net enough? So it was real fun being a road manager, and a fascinating experience, which I write about in the book. Next, please. This is a little illustration of my emptying that pit. The twin pit technology is fascinating. One pit fills up, you close it, you divert to the second, and you wait about a year and a half. The liquid drains out, the solid settles down into a kind of powdery dust, which is actually excellent organic compost. And so that's a little illustration of that. Next, please. Here is, for whoever's interested, a little snapshot of my examination strategy for getting into the IAS exam. Very unusual, highly unorthodox. I roped in everyone. Even my father took a week's leave to prepare for me. So it's a little crazy in retrospect. But one of the pro tips I came up with, when your back is against the wall, it's worth trying something very unusual because you've got nothing to lose. It worked for me. It may work for you as well, but you'll find it interesting at least. Next, please. And of course, in the course of my 4.5 years as Secretary to the Government of India, I ran into Mr. Amitabh Bachchan many times. A few blunders, of course. The first time I met him, and when I sent him an email, he sent me a very stern reply saying, "You got my spelling of my name wrong. And by the way, I met you in my office, not in my house," because I thanked him for meeting me in his house. It was his office. But he became a very good friend, and we had another couple of interesting encounters during the COVID regime when I was chairing the Empowered group. But he's a very good friend. He did everything for us for free, totally pro bono, and very grateful to him for all the work he did for many national programs, including Swachh Bharat. Next, please. And so finally, here are some of the pro tips. There are about 30 odd pro tips in the book, and everyone, each one is different, but each one is coming out of a specific experience I had. So it's not something coming out of thin air, it's coming from an experience. And, you can see these 4 pro tips. I'm not going to read them out, but let me just tell you a little bit about the 4th one, the bottom right one. That's an interesting one. That came from my daughter and son's tennis coach in the US. One of the top tennis coaches in America. His name is Vesa Ponka. He's from Finland. Very interesting. He had about 30 students, tennis students. All of them were trying to become tennis professionals. So they were homeschooling. They were playing for 5 hours a day, putting in a lot of effort. But obviously, some were working harder than others, right? It happens everywhere, whether it's in a classroom or in a tennis academy or in a work organization. There'll be people with different levels of motivation, of hard work, etc. So his point was, okay, he's going to treat all the kids fairly, right? So he's going to give everyone an equal opportunity. But if some tennis playing kids are going to put in more effort, they're going to train harder, right? They are going to give it 110%, and some kids are just not putting in 100% effort. He's going to spend more time with the kids who are putting in more effort. So he'll treat everyone fairly, but not necessarily equally, right? So kids who are not putting in effort, he'll spend less time with them. So he won't spend the same time as he's spending with others. Fortunately, my 2 kids were very, very motivated, and they got a lot of training from Vesa, individual time. So I thought that applies to all of us, right? In all organizations, whether you are the manager or you're one of the staff members, you treat everyone fairly, you give them an opportunity. But people who are putting in more effort, who are doing better, achieving better outcomes, you're going to spend more time with them. You're going to promote them first or give them a higher salary, right? That's only fair. So I like that pro tip a lot, and I've tried to apply it throughout my stints in government and outside. Next, please. I think that might be the last, but I'm not sure. Mahima, is that the last? Okay, so a little endorsement from some of the people who were kind enough, who read the book and liked it. So this is from Bharat Anand, who's a professor in the Harvard Business School. And if you get hold of the book, you'll see that Nandan Nilekani's endorsement, things you won't learn in a typical business school curriculum, that's on the front cover. but Val Curtis, a couple of others have read the book. Shekhar Gupta liked it a lot. So it'll be great if you get hold of a copy. It's available on Amazon. I think they're doing a discount. And just to let you know that all the author's proceeds are going to the Swachh Bharat Kosh, which is a receptacle for private and public agencies to contribute to the Swachh Bharat mission. It's in the finance ministry. So, and you can get the details. So if you buy a book, whatever is that author's share goes to the course. So I thought I'll just mention that to you. So if you get a chance, get hold of the book, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you very much. So you can see there's a little link out there how to order the book. But let me stop there, Pradeep. I might have gone a little over the time, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and hopefully we can have a nice interactive session. Thank you.
Great. Well, this is a book, and several of you have already purchased this, and we have purchased several copies in our laboratory and at the International Center for Clean Water. And I'm sure that many of you would have purchased this already and have read this. So keep your questions ready, and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. But before we get to that, let me ask some questions, and just to give you some time to think about, and then sort of compose your question in your mind. Let me ask you some question as a person who has seen India and internally ask this question: when will our country be America or Singapore or Japan or Finland or whatever? You said about, we converted this movement to a Jan Andolan. What is a Jan Andolan? Why did we forget to convert, or why were we reluctant to convert, let us say, people's science? I'm sitting in an IIT. Why can't I ask this question? Why science did not become a Jan Andolan? So this is one thing that keeps coming to me every time you stand in. The first time I stood in the queue to get into the American embassy, I had to stand in the queue for 7 hours. And that day I decided that maybe one day I would like to stand before the American embassy just for 1 minute. Maybe I would become a valued person one day. This happened very early, and many people have told me about this in their life when they stand before in that queue for long hours. And in Chennai, people used to sleep overnight to get to the American embassy. So let me come to this question: why not Jan Andolan in many cases?
Look, I think it's a great question, Pradeep, and it's very, very relevant in not just today's context. It's been relevant all through. Why not a Jan Andolan in science? Why are we not? Why are people not, standing for 7 hours in a visa queue in other countries to come to India, right? So, I mean, it's a great question. I think I've got a couple of responses. Obviously, there's no answer to that. I think that, after the freedom struggle, which was a Jan Andolan, and that's something which I think the Prime Minister has modeled his approach of getting people involved. How Gandhiji got the whole country aroused and involved in that freedom struggle. I think for some time after that, immediately after independence, once it was achieved, a milestone was achieved, I think to some extent, that fervor, that excitement, having a very clear, concrete goal of achieving independence, there was obviously going to always be a little bit of a letdown in steady state. And so I think that, the next battle was for eradicating poverty, right? for achieving literacy, for improving the quality of life, which is much tougher to sustain over time. It's one thing to, many people have said, I've heard this, you campaign, whatever campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. So when you're in steady state, you need to have another big goal to challenge yourself, to get people excited, and to get people to commit themselves to achieving that big goal. So I think the setting of the goal, that vision, uh, it's up to our sort of political leaders to do that. Many of them have done it, and I think we have had periodic campaigns. Now, but obviously, the pace of development has not been, we've heard of the Hindu rate of growth. We had a spurt of economic growth, and today it's even more challenging in COVID times. So, you can go into many reasons, but getting people involved, particularly in science, I mean, I'm talking to an IIT audience. How do you get people involved at the local level and to be involved and integrated into science? It's a big challenge. I think, Pradeep and others have made a lot of efforts, and there are grassroots organizations which are trying to spread and popularize science. And now, everyone, the fact that you want to get into an IIT is itself a big aspiration. So I think that itself has triggered a revolution of sorts, right? That's the biggest milestone you can achieve. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on involving people. And the Swachh Bharat was one such example. Clearly, the Prime Minister, when he announced this big goal, he was very clear this had to become a people's movement. It could not become what he told me many times and announced a Sarkari program. It could not be, led by the government. The government doesn't have comparative advantage in getting people to participate. It has to be done at the local level. You need local leaders, you need influencers, you need village sarpanches, you need NGOs, you need teachers. And so that's what we tried to do. So we were only playing a kind of facilitating role. And of course, the state governments were doing it at the local level. So it's if we can adopt this approach in other programs, which is now being attempted. So for example, the aspirational district program has got young professionals. They are now getting villages to take charge. And the Jal Jeevan mission is now getting the local water committees to take charge. So I think the more we can democratize national flagship programs, push it down, see ourselves only as facilitators, get people to take charge or at a scale which can be replicated across. I think the more sustainable our programs will be, the more they'll get grounded and the more they will get implemented over time. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, Pradeep. I'm sure you've got other ideas on this, but I thought I would just share those with you.
Well, what I also saw was that when you say method in the madness, at the end of, when I came to the last page of the book, when I wrote you that comment, I saw that by assertive action, madness was getting transformed to a method. This is what you said, what your life in this 4.5 years at Paryavaran Bhavan has shown is that we have a machinery in place. If there is a will, there is a machinery in place to implement programs of this kind. And that many people believe that, well, machinery is non-existent, but you showed that machinery exists. But that very same machinery could have taken up larger things. When Kennedy said, I'll put a man in the moon, that was a great vision. And with machinery in place, it was possible. And this is what is needed in science. And probably, you touched upon the kind of obstacles that we have and how to overcome them. But let me come to my last question, and then we open it up to others. Obviously, this is an aspiration for people across the world. And you touched upon what others learned from this and beginning to learn from that. So can you comment on how this has triggered action elsewhere, and how are we close to ODF free world?
It's a great question, Pradeep, and I'm happy to report to you and others that actually this program had a fairly significant ripple effect across the world, certainly in the developing countries. So, just to give you a concrete example, when after we had an international conference in October 2018 called the Mahatma Gandhi International Sanitation Conference, where we had 55 health and sanitation ministers from around the developing world. We also had the Secretary General of the UN, and of course, he and the Prime Minister addressed the participants. The first concrete result was that the minister from Nigeria went back, he got in touch with us, and then the president of Nigeria announced the Clean Nigeria campaign, which was directly coming out of Swachh Bharat. They were so hugely impressed. I still remember the Nigerian minister, Minister Adamo. He contributed a chapter for the first book which we wrote called the Swachh Bharat Revolution. And I'm still in touch with him at a global level from Washington. They learned a lot from those 4 Ps. Similarly, other countries, Indonesia, where they asked me to go and talk to them about what were those key lessons, how do you sort of develop these large scale transformational programs. Tajikistan in Central Asia is interested. Kenya is doing a program. Even China in the Yangtze River is learning some of those lessons on outcome based programs. So a lot of lessons were learned in terms of what you said, Pradeep, throwing out a big idea, the bhag, the big, hairy, audacious goal, like Kennedy saying we're going to put a man on the moon. We thought ours was even bigger. Prime Minister Modi saying we're going to make India open defecation free in 5 years, changing the behavior of 550 million. That was a super bhag. And so many of these countries realize that you put out a vision, but you implement in mission mode. You get down to nitty gritty, you set out clear milestones, you involve the population, and then you sustain it. So, it sounds rather basic and simple, but when you do it at scale, there are many challenges you encounter. So a lot of influence, and part of my job today in Washington is to take those lessons from our experience in India and to help other countries adapt them to their local context, which will always be different. So one size never fits all, but some key principles can always be applied. So in fact, it is being rolled out both for sanitation and for water. And I think that everyone appreciates those lessons and experiences which we shared with them at that time, and we continue to do now.
Well, let us take questions from people here. Subbu, you have a question. Can you please unmute and ask your question?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Professor, and thanks for the opportunity. It was great hearing you, Sir Parameshwar and Iyer.
Subbu is speaking from IIT Bombay.
Yes, yeah, Subramaniam from IIT Bombay here. So my question relates to the initial part of your presentation, where you talked about the 4 S's: the society, stigma, sustainability, and so on. What is your opinion if I were to say that at the base of all these 4 S's, there is probably the requirement or the demand to cultivate a scientific temper and awareness in the grassroots, at the grassroots level. So if that could be made the foundation, and some kind of a Swachh Bharat or a scientific Bharat program can be triggered, would that not be spiral into so many other things, including Swachhata? So that's
no, Subbu, absolutely. So like you said, I mean, my interpretation of what you're saying is, how do you follow an evidence-based approach, which is what science is all about, at the local level? And how do you make sure that that temperament, that approach cuts across many development programs? And in many ways, that's what we try to do. It's not easy, but how you communicate that becomes very important, right? One thing we learned was that the scientific approach or the evidence-based approach is absolutely critical. What is perhaps even more important is, how do you translate that? How do you articulate that on the ground? That becomes critical. So, for example, when we said that if one of the approaches to trigger that behavior change was for people to understand that actually if you don't have a toilet, or even if your neighbor doesn't have a toilet, but you do, it's still important for the entire community to come together to make their village open defecation free. Because as you saw, if you have piles of excreta lying around in the community or going into the local river or the pond, then that disease, which can be transmitted through flies or waterborne, is still going to come back and hit you even if you have a toilet. So everyone has a stake in it. And the evidence for that is, there's a, I mean, now clearly, now, we don't want to get into scientific papers at the local level, but all the science and the evidence which we learned, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, the research they did, the research from the CDC in Atlanta. So we had to collect all this because there has been a lot of research and evidence. So that has to be communicated in a locally digestible way. And I think you're right. Uh, this approach cuts across and benefits a number of programs, and that's what is being currently tried. Whether it's the aspirational district program or the Jal Jeevan mission, where the evidence for having clean water, uh, in an and conveying that water is not just a social good but an economic good, because people spend 4 hours a day in fetching water, and they'll save a lot of time and money by having tap water in their house. They'll save on medical bills. So I think that evidence base has to be communicated, which is what we try to do.
Mahima, please keep that last slide there so that people can see the link, how to order. Okay, can we have Piyush Ghosh next?
Yeah, hello, Mr. Iyer. This is Piyush from IIT Madras. I have this is not a question, rather than advice and suggestion from your experience. See, the way you have started, that gives me an impression that the Prime Minister actually owned this vision, this dream, and this idea. And you have taken this forward, you have led from the front, and you have driven it successfully, and then the entire program reached to the mass. Now, because it came from the Prime Minister, it could reach to the mass so easily. When I say easy, so easily, I mean, of course, not that easily, but I mean that. Now, if I have some idea, or a couple of my colleagues, we have some idea, and we are from this field, and let's say we believe in this, and we know that is going to be extremely useful for the nation, how do we take it to the mass? I mean, I know that that we have to, of course, reach the right person eventually in the government lineup. But what would be your advice? How do I go and take it to the mass?
Look, it's a very good question, and it's something which we have been grappling with in the water and sanitation sector for 20 odd years. One thing we realized, so essentially what you're saying is, let's say you have a technical solution to a particular problem, right? Whether it's water quality, you can do low-cost arsenic treatment, or you can do wastewater reuse at a low cost, and you can recharge groundwater.
I will give you an example specifically. Like let's say, for example, we have something related to education in general, and not necessarily one technical solution. And we know that is going to be really useful if we can actually take it to the across India. So in that sense, so that it becomes a little bit more specific and then more easy to answer for you.
Sure. So, whether it's education or technology, the one thing, perhaps, what we say, there's a standard phrase which we use is, instead of trying to fix the pipes, we want to fix the institutions which fix the pipes. So in all this, what is really important is to get it into policy, right? Once you get it into policy, whether it's at a national or a state level, because many of these subjects are state subjects, then it gets onto the policy agenda, it gets political support, it gets mainstreamed into the budget because there's financing, and then you roll it out. So there are a lot of great ideas out there, but the challenge is how do you take them to scale and how do you implement them? And so what we try to do in the bank, what we have learned from all the experience I've had both inside and outside government, is that we need to make the case for whatever ideas we have, which we have tested, even if we have tested them on the ground. So how do you, that's the biggest challenge, right? So how do you take an idea, as you're saying, because your point was, this was fine. We had a prime minister who threw out a vision from above, and then we took that vision and together we worked with the state governments and the local villages to convert that into reality. And so how, your question is, how do you do it bottom up? So it's not easy, right? It's obviously not easy. But so bottom up is also difficult. Top down in many cases hasn't worked. So I mean, what you need to do is to take that idea, articulate it. If it's, hopefully it's an evidence-based approach, and you have to take it to a policy level. And to do that, you have got to make a convincing case to the policymakers. Once they accept it based on the evidence, then it gets mainstreamed into a policy, right? And if it's government which is leading the policy, government will roll it out. Now in Bangladesh, for example, it wasn't the government. It was big NGOs like BRAC and Grameen Bank, which started scaling up programs on education, on sanitation, etc. So it depends on the context, but taking to scale requires ultimately getting into an institutional and policy level so that it can go out to scale. Otherwise, it will always remain at a local level or at a pilot level.
It's a very important point that Mr. Iyer is bringing up. That is, even in IITs, we talk about technology, but unless there is an interface with policy, this is not going to reach. And that is why in IIT Madras, at least, we have started in a small way with technology and policy interface. Well, let me go to Mr. Sripati. Mr. Sripati, you have a question.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Mr. Iyer, for the excellent insights that you have provided in your entire career of building the madness first and then putting a method to it. And we have to learn from such insights. And we would like to take this to the present context of water that we are talking about. Having worked in the industry for so many years, we have seen a lot of movements, energy movement, green building movement, now the Swachh Bharat movement, and you have been one of the outliers in this entire journey of creating such a movement. What will be the madness that we will have to get into? I would like to pose it this way. What sort of madness or craziness that we have to get into when we think about water as a subject? And probably after that comes methods. This is probably one thing which I would like to ask you. Though I have not gone through the book in full detail, I would like to learn from you and then take it up as a initiative that we can think of on water. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you, Mr. Sripati. That's a very interesting question. Look, there's a lot of madness. And for me, madness was only a metaphor for the unpredictability of of our careers or of life, right? There are many twists and turns in all the journeys which we take. You have highs, you have lows, you have fulfillment, you have disappointments, and so I just use the term. Actually, my wife's idea was the method in the madness. And so how do you deal with that chaos, which all of us go through? In the water sector, which you're talking about, let's come to that. There is, if you want to use the same metaphor, there is a lot of madness, right? Water globally is one of the top 5 risks which countries, private sector, public sector is facing, right? People fight wars over water. So it's a very, very sensitive, volatile subject. In India, for example, water, if you look at water in its widest possible range, all the way from water resources to service delivery. In India, we get the monsoon for about 8 weeks in most parts of India, and then we don't store it, right? It all disappears into the sea, into rivers and then the sea. So storage of water, not just through big dams, but through local storage. How do you conserve and recharge groundwater? Cities are going without water now. Many cities will run out of water. Then demand side management is crazy, is again mad, where we have non-revenue water of 40-50%. which means that you supply water from one source and you lose through leakage and other ways 50%. So it's quite chaotic. So in that sense, there is a lot of madness in the water sector, but you need to bring some method into it. And one institutional method of bringing in, which was brought in by the Prime Minister in 2019, was very, very significant. And I don't know how many of you got that. For the first time in India, two ministries were merged, the Ministry of Water Resources and the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, which I was the secretary of. They were brought together for integration because water writ large was never connected. Water in India and in most countries in the world is, is basically split up into many different ministries. So agriculture does irrigation, urban does cities water, rural does rural water, environment has a role, rural development has a role. And typically there was a lack of integration to take a holistic approach to water management. And so by creating the Ministry of Jal Shakti, it was a very important step towards taking an overall and integrated holistic view of water. Now, many state governments are institutionally merging as well. Still much more work to be done. And agriculture continues to be the sector which demands and takes 90% of all water which is produced. And then we have the whole issue of, whether it's well managed, whether irrigation is efficient, are we producing crops which are more water intensive than they should be? How do you get farmers to change behaviors? What are the incentives? So it's quite chaotic, right? And I think a lot of steps have been taken. Much more needs to be done. But when you start looking at water holistically, then some of these pieces of the puzzle fall into place. But again, there are major challenges in water, and there's huge scope for improvement, whether it's on water quality, whether it's low-cost delivery, whether it's water management, whether it's bulk water supply, whether it's pricing. It's a very, very for me, a very exciting sector because there's so much more to be done.
Well, we need to close in about 10 minutes or so. We can take probably 2 more questions and conclude. And let me ask Krishnan Narayanan to pose his question, followed by Ramya.
Right.
Krishnan.
So your story is very inspiring. Thank you for talking to us.
Krishnan is, from Bangalore.
Can you hear me, Professor?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So thank you so much. Your story is very inspiring. My question was, how did you go about creating a data-driven governance framework in the Swachh Bharat mission? My guess is that this must have been some new mindset thinking. So you would have faced some resistance. Can you share 1 or 2 interesting anecdotes?
Sure, Krishnan, great question. And in fact, we did follow that. I actually came down to Bangalore once to meet Nandan Nilekani to get advice on that. Now, the platform we use, so it became really important when you're embarking on a mission of this size to get your data digitized, put on an open platform, and then how do you, and then monitor it, and to also to get the excitement of the program, the competitive spirit of the program, because we had states and districts competing, it became important to have a ticking dashboard as well, right? Which was the front face of this whole backbone we created. So the NIC did a fabulous job, the National Informatics Center. Our data, so we have a database, the ministry has a database of 17 crore households. And this took a lot of time to develop. So we were building on the data which was already there. So it became important then to geotag every single individual toilet for credibility. In some cases, the geotagging was not properly done, so we had to verify checks. So that data is stored in some cloud somewhere, but just maintaining that enormous data became a very important task of the Swachh Bharat mission. So one was, so there is a household list. There is an app called the Swachh Bharat app, which draws upon that data. And with that, you can go to a village. You can ask for Mr. Atmaram Chadda. You can meet the person, and you have the full data on when that toilet was installed. You can ask the person, is it still functioning? And so this was done by our NIC team, we had a team of about 40, 50 people who were just focusing full time on keeping this data going and updated. That is one example. Use of technology generally was, we made huge use. You can't scale up behavior change without that. So we were running virtual classrooms. We got the Tata Trust to help us with this. And we had experts sitting in a studio in Noida who were doing behavior change communication virtually, across 1,000, I'm saying villages, but actually at block level, at district level. So you can't substitute field work through online because people have to go out and do the triggering exercises. So again, we use technology there. But our data, and now that has gone into the Jal Jeevan mission. So now there's a data in the Jal Jeevan mission, the water mission. Pradeep knows all about this. 150 million households are to get tap connections. Now, again, so that database is a different database, but by the same set of people. And so that's being monitored. We are using technology now for monitoring, whether water is coming out of a tap, sensors. The Tata Group is helping us with that. So there's huge data which is being stored, which has to be protected and maintained. And then we're using technology to drive both these programs.
All right, Ramya.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your experience and inspiring all of us. I have two questions. While the goals of Swachh Bharat mission are achieved, what do you think is the next step for India in this context? And on another note, while you have germinated the idea of Swachh Bharat mission among people, it needs to be sustained perpetually at all levels. And do you see that happening, sir? Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Ramya. And let me take the first one. What do I see? What's the kind of next step or next stage? So the Swachh Bharat mission has moved on to Swachh Bharat Phase 2, which essentially looks at two things. One is it focuses on sustaining all the outcomes of open defecation free, which means that you continue the behavior change communication. You have to continue the capacity building. And in fact, the 15th Finance Commission has earmarked 30,000 crores last year and again this year for maintaining the assets which were created. And so that's one concrete step taken. But also the whole concept of sanitation has got broadened. In Swachh Bharat Phase 1, we were focusing on preventing open defecation or creating open defecation-free villages. Again, so now the focus is on a broader definition because we still have to deal with solid waste management. It's not just an urban issue, it's increasingly becoming an issue in rural and peri-urban India, but also plastic waste management. A couple of years ago, the Prime Minister announced that India would be free of single-use plastic by 2022. So plastic waste is becoming a big issue, but also organic waste, right? How do you take cattle waste, agricultural waste, convert that into energy? So that's another big part of Swachh Bharat Phase 2. There's a program called Gobar Dhan, which is looking at the old biogas, but going well beyond that, looking at scale, looking at bio-CNG, looking at energy, looking at bio-slurry for organic fertilizers. And then it's also looking at grey water management, something which Pradeep and team gave us a lot of excellent advice on. How do you take the grey water which comes out of the kitchen tap or bathing, and with minimal treatment, low-cost treatment, how can you use that, reuse it either for agriculture, like they do in Israel, or even for recharge of groundwater? So this is where Swachh Bharat has moved into, and it's continuing second phase from 2019 to 2024. On your second question, how do you make it stick? Behavior change, sustaining it, and all the gains are very, very difficult. That's something I learned personally from Cass Sunstein, the co-author of Nudge, who was amazed at how Swachh Bharat was doing Nudge at a scale which he and Thaler would never have imagined. They were talking of changing behavior in a departmental store or in a supermarket. But when you change the behavior of 550 million people, not through coercion, but through motivating, incentivizing, nudging, that was a scale they couldn't have imagined. But you have to keep at it. And so sanitation is like that old Citibank ad, the city never sleeps. You know, it's never mission accomplished, ever. You have to keep working at it. The Prime Minister made that very clear at a big event and the Sabarmati Ashram on 2nd October 2019. Because, you know, as they say in Hindi, picture abhi baki hai. There's a lot of more work to be done. There will be gaps, there will be some slip backs. You have to keep at it for a certain period of time to make sure that the outcomes will become permanent. And that's the effort which is going on now.
We should conclude with the one last question. Vivek Yadav is a young student and he wants India to be #1. What's your question, Vivek?
Thank you very much, sir, for your inspirational talk. Sir, I was amazed to see India is ranked 168 out of 180 in cleanliness according to IANS report 2021. According to you, what can be the other plans with which we can make India #1 in cleanliness?
Sure. Look, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, 6.2 is on safe access to sanitation. And India made a huge stride to contribute globally to that goal, you know, when we achieved the Swachh Bharat mission. But obviously, there are other dimensions to, you know, to sanitation, and then there's the hygiene promotion, which has become even more important during COVID times, right? Washing your hands with soap, wearing a mask, not spitting. So I think that this effort needs to continue. And as someone once said, never let a crisis go to waste. So as soon as COVID struck, you know, we built on that, started doing more promotion of hygiene. So a lot of work needs to be done. It's got to be done, I think, in mission mode, setting yourself timelines and clear-cut targets. And the whole effort on broadening sanitation, it has to go hand in hand with water. That's exactly what is being done today. So Swachh Bharat Mission Phase 2, rural, Swachh Bharat Mission Phase 2, urban, the Jal Jeevan Mission, which is providing drinking water, which goes hand in hand with sanitation. So I think this effort to set clear-cut goals and to have a roadmap and an implementation plan, I think that's the way to go. And then we need to, of course, focus to achieve it. So I think if we do this in different programs, I'm sure we'll move up that ranking which you referred to.
Well, thank you. I think we have crossed our time limit substantially. Is 5:59 now. We should close this meeting. What a pleasure it was to hear you and to pick your brains on various questions. Well, what is quite clear is that when people say that India is a place where it's a crab mind, right? That's what we say, Indians crab mind. And these crabs have pulled down everybody. And what you have shown is that although people keep pulling down with technology, with a vision, with a direction, it is possible to unite. It's possible to have synergy. It is possible to have a high impact outcome. For a bureaucrat, well, I wouldn't like to see you as a bureaucrat, but although that is what that profession is. But that profession, what a satisfaction it brings to you, what a satisfaction it brings to people. I see that there is a lot that everyone can learn from that togetherness. And if in 4.5 years, if that can be accomplished, well, obviously India will be #1. It's not that India will be #1, as Tagore would say, the world will be #1, right? It is a vision for the world. So let us see the power of technology and togetherness, especially in this time. So maybe COVID has brought us something good, that Mr. Iyer could find time and write this book. And let there be more such books. Let there be more action like this. let there be more people inspired by this. Thank you very much. Let's conclude this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Iyer.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, and all of you for inviting me for this fascinating interactive session. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Great questions. Thank you so much, and hope to continue the dialogue. Thank you once again.
Thank you.